I just want to reiterate for anybody who might just be joining us that we are reporting on breaking news out of New Orleans at around 3:17 a.m. local time. There were reports of a vehicle having driven through a crowd of pedestrians on the packed Bourbon Street as revelers were ringing in the new year. A total of 10 victims declared deceased on the scene, 35 victims to have suffered injuries in this. We also know that the suspect apparently opened fire on responding officers who returned fire, and that person was struck and was subsequently declared deceased on the scene. We know 2 officers in the New Orleans Police Department were struck in the exchange. They are listed in stable condition. I want to bring in back with us former FBI Special Agent Doug Kouns. And Doug, as we've been talking to Scott, we've been talking to Sam Vinograd. What are some of your thoughts?
You make a lot of good points. There's a lot of special events coming up, not only in New Orleans, but around the country, football games, college and NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl, along with countless concerts and these kind of things. So all the law enforcement departments around the country are going to be looking at ways to improve the access to these venues to make them even more safe, and that might be parking trucks, normal pedestrian walkways or things like that. So we may see some changes, may see some inconveniences. And it's just how it is, I guess, when we have these things happening. Someone else earlier mentioned there's this line between the businesses and the public's access to these things they want to enjoy, along with the difficulty of keeping them all safe. And it's difficult, but that's what we do.
And while we've been talking, we have new information just into our CBS News newsroom that according to sources, law enforcement and city official sources to our Rob Legary, Anna Schechter, and Rich Esposito, investigators are probing whether the suspect was connected to or inspired by a foreign terror organization. This note also says what we have previously reported, that investigators are analyzing potential explosive devices recovered at or near the scene. So, Doug, when we have the fact that investigators are probing whether the suspect was connected to or inspired by a foreign terror organization, what is the significance of that?
Semantics, this is terrorism, right? This has caused terror and panic amongst the people that are there. People around the country and world are watching this. They're concerned about what's going to happen to them if they go to something like this. So it's terror. So it comes down to, about prosecution and what would someone be charged with. Now, obviously, this person is deceased, but there could be a network of other people. And, the FBI takes the lead in these terrorism investigations. So that's somewhat significant that every field office has a joint terrorism task force comprised of officers from all of the agencies, the state and local agencies and their venue, ATF, DEA. They often are all part of this, and they bring their strengths with them to help out in these kind of investigations. I think another thing they're really going to be looking at is this person's communications. If they recovered a cell phone, any kind of electronic device, who has he been talking to in the last few hours and days before this happened? That will give them a lot of clues as to, is this part of something bigger?
I want to bring Sam Vinograd back into the conversation. Sam, Doug brings up a very good point that, when we're talking about terrorism-related acts, some of it is semantics, that the idea is to create as much terror and fear as possible in a community. But the idea that we can now report, according to sources, investigators are probing whether the suspect was connected to or inspired by a foreign terror organization. Is that something that would happen in any given investigation, or do they have maybe some kind of indication already, and that is why we were able to report that?
Well, Lindsay, I think it could be either of those two options. So typically in a situation like this, investigators are going to look as to whether this individual was inspired by a foreign terrorist organization, was in touch with a foreign terrorist organization, what we call a homegrown violent extremist, or whether this individual was inspired or in touch with domestic terrorists of any kind. So it is usually par for the course to look at whether a suspect in a mass casualty event that's being investigated as terrorism has had any contact or inspiration from a terrorism group of any kind. What we don't know is if law enforcement has found any signs already on the individual's person, in his vehicle, perhaps at his residence, if they know where he lived or where he was staying, or on his social media profiles, which may still be active as far as we know, that this individual had ties to a foreign terrorist organization like ISIS or Al Qaeda or others. At the same time, as I mentioned, they are also likely reviewing whether this individual was inspired by or in touch with any domestic terrorist organization as well. That is standard in these kinds of investigations.
Sam, what changes might we see tonight at the Sugar Bowl game?
Certainly, there will be an enhanced level of vigilance by law enforcement, but what is hard to predict at this stage is whether there is any associated threat from what occurred at Bourbon Street last night. We have not yet heard from law enforcement that the threat has been totally neutralized, that this individual acted alone and that this individual was not in touch with others to try to inspire them to engage in attacks as well in and around the attack last night. So at the press conference in about 2 hours, I'll be waiting to hear if that is the case. We should expect already there to be significant physical barriers in and around the game where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. That is likely in place. And we could see some additional level of screening of vehicles coming into or out of parking facilities near to the game itself. But Lindsay, I would have guessed that already there was going to be a high level of security for this event. And so we'll have to wait and see from the press conference whether there's any associated threats with this individual. That the toughest nut to crack is whether there's any copycat attacks, anybody inspired by what transpired a few hours ago to try to take similar action. And those kinds of copycat attacks by lone actors are incredibly difficult to prevent.
You know, we had heard from our CBS News correspondent, Nikki Batiste, yesterday. She was reporting on preparations in New York's Times Square, and that one of the law enforcement officials that she had spoken with said one of the biggest challenges is the unpredictability of this. Obviously, for, these actors, bad actors with ill intentions, trying to fly under the radar. And so I wonder, and given the sensitivity of this and the fact that so many people are suffering in New Orleans, what is it about that area, that Bourbon and Canal Street, that would have made it such a target?
Well, it was a target because there was such a dense concentration of individuals and it's a high profile area. So unfortunately, from an impact perspective, this was a high value target. The suspect was able, if in fact he is a perpetrator, to inflict maximum damage in a very short amount of time, to inflict a lot of physical violence. But I do want to note one thing: as difficult as these lone actors and small groups are to find and to prevent attacks occurring from their actions, law enforcement does have a range of tools that they employ, including confidential sources, including surveillance, in both social media channels as well as encrypted platforms, to try to find these individuals before they actually engage in violence. So law enforcement is using every tool at their disposal to try to find individuals before they engage in an act of violence. So it's a responsibility for law enforcement to use those assets very carefully, as well as for the public to contact law enforcement if they ever feel that they see an individual radicalizing to violence. So it's really those two tracks that are going to help make our country safer, Lindsay.
For anyone who is just joining us, I want to go ahead and play some sound that we have from New Orleans Police Department Superintendent about just some of the facts of the case. Let's listen.
This event started at about 3:15. It did involve a man driving a pickup truck down Bourbon Street at a very fast pace, and it was very intentional behavior. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could.
I want to bring back former FBI Special Agent Doug Kouns. So, Doug, that assessment there from the New Orleans Police Superintendent, is a lot of the information right now that law enforcement are working with or witness statements and testimony? And do you think by now they're also looking at whether there was any CCTV footage, any closed circuit television footage from surveillance cameras?
Yeah, absolutely. Several hours have elapsed now, and I'm sure multiple witnesses have been interviewed. There are cameras everywhere, and those are being gathered and reviewed as we speak, analyzed. They want to know not just, what happened during that time, but can they trace that car back farther? Where did it come from? where did that person stay the night or the day leading up to this? Basically trying to recreate the entire day, much like with the marathon bombing in Boston years ago. They were able to piece together well back before the actual incident occurred, and that helped them identify who the person was and ultimately make the arrests on that.
All right, Doug Kouns, unfortunate that you have to join us on this New Year's Day on this topic, but we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam, I want to throw it back to you and your thoughts.
I agree with everything that Doug said. I think what's really going to be instructive over the coming hours is understanding more about this suspect's history, whether he displayed any signs of worrisome behavior over the past several hours, past several days, past several weeks, whether he was known to law enforcement, Lindsay. We don't know whether this individual had any kind of criminal history, because what that'll help piece together is how we can prevent these kinds of attacks going forward. Again, preventing acts of targeted violence and terrorism, and the FBI is still investigating whether this is an act of terrorism, requires action by law enforcement using a range of authorized techniques like surveillance, like confidential human sources, and other methodologies, as well as actions by the public to raise a red flag and ask for help from law enforcement whenever they see an individual engaging in worrisome behavior. So understanding this individual's history is going to be incredibly important. And then, of course, law enforcement is certainly going to take a step back and review their security protocols in and around Bourbon Street to try to identify how this individual was able to weave through the barriers that had been put in place and how he was able to kill, unfortunately, at least 10 people prior to being neutralized by law enforcement. So that after action is certainly going to be put into effect despite law enforcement engaging in heroic actions last night.
And Sam, the fact that law enforcement was prepared and already on the scene, does that help when it comes to triage and getting treatment immediately to those who are injured?
Certainly, law enforcement and emergency responders practice, unfortunately, for these kinds of mass casualty events all the time. Somewhere like Bourbon Street, even when it's not New Year's Eve, has a heavy concentration of law enforcement, and emergency responders are used to going to that scene for a variety of reasons. So the ability to quickly provide emergency response was likely incredibly helpful, relatively speaking. But that doesn't change the fact that 10 people are dead, many more injured, and we could see the fatality count rise. But law enforcement and emergency responders practice, unfortunately, but necessarily, very regularly to respond quickly and efficiently to triage at the scene and to provide medical support, as well as to begin investigating immediately, because oftentimes there's critical evidence that's out there, both in terms of people who witnessed the attack, as well as other assets that may be on the scene that need to be immediately investigated as part of law enforcement's efforts to figure out what happened.